This presentation will be a discussion on the imperialism of economics, a history of economic thought, topic presentation. The content that will be discussed in this video, it just includes an introduction of economics imperialism, what is economics imperialism, and then we're going to look at the different schools of thought. Then we'll discuss the different discourse on economic imperialism, including social capital theory, and finally we'll end off with the good and the bad of economics imperialism. So what is economics imperialism? Both economic history and new development economics showcase an economics imperialism where showcasing knowledge, where existing knowledge is potentially plundered and reproduced on the basis of the new micro-foundations. The new micro-foundations can be described under microeconomics as the behaviors of individuals in a household or business, and are a response from the new classical economics justifying the rejection of a perfect market economy. The expression denotes both the imperialism of the discipline of economics in the academic realm and the economy-driven imperialism in international relations and the global economy. This presentation will focus on the former, as it denotes the economic analysis of non-economic aspects of life as it pertains to the social sciences. There has been heated contention within the intellectual landscapes as a result of the growing presence of economic ideas in social scientists' home disciplines. Many argue that the new economic framework deploys a type of reductionism based on economic and social imperfections, while ransacking existing knowledge and colonizing knowledge within a new framework. Mackey says, economics imperialism is a form of economics expansionism where the new types of explanatory phenomena are found in territories that are occupied by disciplines outside of economics, and where economics presents itself hegemonically as being in possession of superior theories and methods, thereby excluding rival theories and approaches from consideration. George Stigler sums it up nicely when he writes, "So, economics is an imperial science. It has been aggressive in addressing central problems in a considerable number of neighboring social disciplines and without any invitations." So now we will focus on three different scholars as pertaining to economics imperialism, namely Gary Becker, Douglas North, and Oliver Williamson. All three scholars are American and are all Nobel Prize winners in economics in the case of Becker, and economic sciences in the case of North and Williamson. Gary Becker, who spent his academic life as both a professor of economics and professor of sociology, wrote his most prominent work, Human Capital, and confidently described himself as an economic imperialist. Becker's central premise was that rational economic choices based on self-interest govern most aspects of human behavior, not just the purchasing and investment decisions traditionally thought to influence economic behavior. Douglas North was an economist who, alongside his colleague Robert Vogel, was the recipient of the 1993 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. The two were recognized for their pioneering work in cliometrics, also known as New Economic History, which is the application of economic theory and statistical methods to the study of history. Oliver Williamson was a social scientist who, with Elinor Ostrom, was awarded the 2009 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences for his analysis of economic governance, especially the boundaries of the firm. Williamson was credited with creating a new branch of economic thought called New Institutional Economics through his research. Now to look at some of the differences in the schools of thought of the three scholars. So Becker based his epistemological evidence on the rationality model, that is, the assumption that all behavior is rational until it is proven not. He said that there is no theory beyond the scope of neoclassical economic analytical reach. And he was mainly concerned about neoclassical analysis and how it can be extended to areas outside of the economy. Becker did not allow for the feedback mechanisms of the tiers of analysis as North and Williamson, which will be discussed further. North said neoclassical economics is deficient in explaining stability or change. Change in history requires a theory of ideology to account for these deviations from the individualistic rational calculus of neoclassical theory. His starting point was individuals' motivation and resource allocation in the context of property rights and later within the context of institutions. Oliver Williamson preferred an approach that appealed to history in the form of initial conditions through a four-tier analytical schema. He proposed a four-tier analytical approach, which included a third-order economizing, or get the marginal conditions right, which also had a second-order economizing, which was devoted to transaction costs economics, or get the governance structure right, followed by a first-order economizing concerned with property rights, or get the institutional environment right. And lastly, social theory, which encompasses informal institutions, traditions, and culture. His starting point was the third-order economizing thought, which says get marginal conditions right. So though these scholars had different approaches, all three relied on the neoclassical economic model as its explanation. The main concern in the discourse of economics imperialism is that economics is colonizing the social sciences, or vice versa. It is argued that neoclassical economics relies solely on the generalized social and historical categories such as production, consumption, and utility to address socially and historically specific contexts. Joseph Stiglitz argued that neoclassical economics neglects the historical, institutional, and distributional aspects of economics, thus leaving out the heart of development economics, especially where market failures are pervasive, such as in less developed countries. Economics imperialism assumes, on the one hand, that the social is understood as the non-market, those activities lying outside the domain of supply and demand in the form of monetary exchange. On the other hand, the social is acknowledged in the form of what appears, falsely, to be irrational behavior from the perspective of utility maximizing individuals. Lazier cites that, despite the general assumptions and narrow scope utilized by economists, economics is a kind of premier social science, scientific in nature and method, which has an ability to address a wide range of problems. Economists typically start with a functioning economy as its end goal, and thus analyze the social context which might be leading to market imperfections. Alternatively, sociologists typically start with the social and reconstruct it on the basis of rational choice, and this is where the differences have caused a lot of contention. Alternatively, some have argued that social capital is the social sciences counterpart to economics imperialism. Social capital theory encompasses a wide range of topics from schooling to work, and democracy and governance to collective action, and transitional societies. All social, cultural, and economic aspects are included across space-time theories and methodologies. Social capitalists believe they are civilizing economists, moving them away from the focus on perfect competition to a more social context. So, what is good about economics imperialism? Is there any good? Well, economics imperialism contests the dogma which underpins neoliberalism by consolidating methodological individualism and focusing on market imperfections as a framework for both economic and non-economic categories. It also promotes interdisciplinarity. It bypasses the worst excesses of postmodernism. Economic content is being embraced more within the social sciences, and economists are making more considerations to the social aspects within a society, restoring the place it held pre-marginalist revolution. Now on to the not so good about economics imperialism. Well, There is little awareness of the epistemological constraint, which is that stringent refutability is hard to find in economic theories, and revision of theory based on evidence often oversimplifies to a point of distortion, as well as assumptions in non-experimental models and theorizing tend to increase the gap between theory and evidence, foregoing the complexities of the world around us, something which the social sciences encompasses much more deeply. Thank you for making it to the end of my presentation. I hope you were able to learn something new today about economics imperialism.